The woman in seat 14C was crying before the plane even left the gate. Hazel noticed her the way flight attendants notice everything, peripherally, instinctively, the way you learn to read a cabin full of strangers in under 30 seconds. The woman wasn't sobbing. It was quieter than that. She was staring at the window with her hands folded in her lap, and her shoulders were doing that slow, barely there shudder that people do when they're trying very hard not to fall apart in public. Hazel had seen it 1,000 times. Grief looks the same at 30,000 feet as it does on the ground. She finished her safety demonstration, went through the motions she could do in her sleep, and when the seatbelt sign clicked off and the cart started moving, she made sure she was the one who worked the aisle near row 14. "Can I get you anything?" she asked, crouching slightly so she wasn't towering over the woman. The woman looked up. She had dark eyes, the kind that looked even darker when they were wet. Late 30s, maybe 40. Pretty in a tired way, the way people are pretty when they've stopped paying attention to it. "Just water," she said. "Thank you." Her name was Avery. Hazel didn't know that yet. She would learn it 40 minutes later over the Rockies when the woman pressed her call button and Hazel came back and found her holding her phone out like it was something that had bitten her. "I'm sorry," Avery said. "I know this is, I don't know why I'm asking you. I need someone to look at this and tell me I'm not losing my mind." Hazel looked at the phone. It was a text thread. The contact name at the top of the screen said Cole, the most recent message, sent 11 minutes ago, read still at the office. "Don't wait up." "I don't understand," Hazel said carefully. "What am I looking at?" Avery's jaw tightened. "His location," she said. "I have his location on my phone. He thinks I deleted the app." She swiped to a different screen, a blue dot pulsing softly over a map. "That dot is him." Right now, Hazel looked at the map. Then she looked at Avery. The blue dot was not at an office. It was at a residential address in the Millbrook neighborhood of Denver. A part of the city Hazel knew because she'd grown up there, in a duplex on Claremont Street, and she knew the grid of those blocks the way you know the layout of a childhood bedroom. "He's at a house," Hazel said. "He's been there," Avery said, "every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 4 months. Every single time he tells me he's working late." The seat in front of them shifted. A child peered over the headrest, bored, and Avery quickly turned her phone face down. "I shouldn't have said anything," Avery said. "I'm sorry." "You're working." "Don't apologize," Hazel said, and then, because she didn't know what else to do, she sat down in the empty seat across the aisle and said, "I have 12 minutes before I need to start the second cart. Tell me." Hazel had been flying for 11 years. She'd chosen it on purpose, the constant motion, the clean geometry of arrivals and departures, the way every city looked beautiful from the air and every problem looked smaller at altitude. She was 37 years old. She was married to a man named Douglas, and she loved him in the way you love someone you've built a life with, the way love becomes less like a feeling and more like a foundation, something you stand on without thinking about it. She had a house in Phoenix, a rescue dog named Fig, a calendar full of layovers and turnarounds, a marriage that she had always, without question, believed was solid. She thought about all of this on the descent into Denver, after the cart was put away and Avery had stopped crying and was sitting very still, with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had gone cold. Hazel didn't think about her own marriage because anything was wrong with it. She thought about it the way you think about a glass of water that's sitting on the edge of a table. Not because it's falling, but because you've just watched someone else's glass fall, and now you're aware of edges in a way you weren't before. She thought, "I know where Douglas is right now. He was in Phoenix." He'd texted her at 6 that morning, a photo of Fig looking mournful by the back door, with the caption, "She misses you already." He did that every time she had an early departure. He'd done it for 8 years. She didn't need a location app to know where her husband was. She never had. She thought what a specific kind of luck that is, what a thing to take for granted. Avery's full name was Avery Langston. She'd grown up in Ohio, moved to Denver for graduate school, stayed for a man named Cole Merritt, who had walked into her thesis defense looking for a different room and had apologized so elaborately for the interruption that she'd laughed out loud in the middle of her own presentation. They'd been married for 6 years. She told Hazel this in the gate area at Denver International. sitting on plastic chairs with their carry-ons between them, after the plane had landed and neither of them had moved to leave. 6 years, Avery said. And I'm not a naive person. I'm a researcher. I study behavioral economics. I spend my entire professional life looking for the patterns that people can't see in themselves. She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. And I didn't see it. When did you start to? 3 months ago. Maybe longer, if I'm honest with myself. She looked at her hands. He started sleeping with his phone face down. That was the first thing. It's such a small thing. I kept telling myself it didn't mean anything. She paused. But I'm a behavioral economist. I know what small changes in pattern mean. Hazel's next flight was in 4 hours. She had a hotel room booked near the airport. She had a novel she'd been trying to finish for 6 weeks, and a room service menu she'd already memorized from 3 previous layovers. She stayed in the gate area. "What are you going to do?" she asked. Avery looked out at the tarmac. A plane was pushing back from the gate across the way, slow and enormous in the gray morning light. "I don't know," she said. "I came here to visit my sister. I was going to tell Cole I needed some time to think." She shook her head. "What I actually needed was to get on a plane going anywhere so I could think without being in a house that feels like a lie." "That's not nothing," Hazel said. "That's actually very sane." Avery looked at her. "You're very kind." "I'm really not," Hazel said. "I'm just a stranger who sat down in a jump seat because you looked like you needed someone to sit down." Avery smiled at that. A real smile, small and tired. "That counts," she said. "That counts more than you know." They exchanged numbers at the security exit. It felt a little strange and also completely natural, the way certain connections do. The ones that happen at altitude, or in hospital waiting rooms, or on the sides of highways. At 2 in the morning, the contexts where normal social rules dissolve, and people just say what they mean. "If you ever want to talk," Hazel said. "I'll take you up on that," Avery said. "I mean it. I'm terrible at reaching out to people. I always feel like I'm bothering someone." "You flagged me down on a plane at 30,000 feet, Hazel said. "I think you're better at it than you think." Avery laughed. A real one this time. Hazel's layover hotel was a Marriott 6 minutes from the terminal. She'd stayed in it so many times she knew which elevator was slow and which ice machine on the 3rd floor was broken. She ordered a club sandwich she didn't really want and sat on the bed and called Douglas. He picked up on the 2nd ring. He always picked up on the 2nd ring. "Hey," he said, "how was the flight?" "Good, easy. There was some turbulence over the Rockies, but nothing serious." She paused. "How's Fig?" "Dramatic. She found your cardigan on the couch, and she's been lying on it like it's a memorial." Hazel laughed. She lay back on the hotel duvet and stared at the ceiling. "Doug," she said. "Yeah? Do you ever?" She stopped. Tried again. "Are you happy?" A beat of silence. Not the silence of someone caught out or someone calculating, just the silence of someone who was genuinely considering the question. "Yeah," he said, "I'm happy." "Are you asking because something happened, or are you just—" "Nothing happened. I just had a strange day. I met someone on the plane. Yeah, she's going through something hard. It made me think her bad things." "Good, I think," Hazel said. "I think it reminded me that some things I know about us, I just know, and I don't think about them enough." Douglas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I love you, you know. In case I don't say it enough." "You say it enough," she said. "Go take Fig outside. She's been on my cardigan all day." She could hear him smiling through the phone. "Okay. Call me when you're back at the airport." "I will." She hung up and lay there for a while in the quiet of the Marriott room, listening to the distant sound of planes, and she thought about Avery Langston sitting on a plane heading away from her life, trying to find enough altitude to see it clearly. She thought, some people are very unlucky, and she thought, some people are very lucky and don't know it, and she wasn't sure, in that moment, which category hurt more to think about. Avery texted her 3 days later. "I talked to Cole." A pause, the typing bubble appearing and disappearing twice, and then, "He didn't even try to deny it. Is that better or worse?" "I genuinely cannot tell." Hazel was in the crew lounge at JFK, eating a granola bar and reading gate change notices. She texted back immediately. "I think it means he's done pretending," which is terrible and also might be the beginning of something. The beginning of what? I don't know yet, but you'll figure it out. You're a behavioral economist who studies patterns. This is just a new data set. 3 dots. Then, that is both the most and least comforting thing anyone has said to me this week. Then, thank you. Cole Merritt had not been working late. This was not a surprise to Avery. She had known it, in the specific way that you know something before you've decided to know it. It lives in the body before it reaches the brain. A low-grade wrongness that you explain away until one day you stop explaining. What she hadn't known, what blindsided her even more than the infidelity itself, was the specificity of it, the duration, the texture. Cole had been seeing a woman named Daphne Okafor for 14 months. Not an impulsive thing, not a one-time mistake. A parallel life, carefully maintained, with its own routines and intimacies. And Avery would discover 2 weeks after the initial confrontation, its own financial entanglements. A shared streaming account, a set of luggage tags purchased together on a trip to Santa Fe that Cole had told Avery was a work conference. Daphne didn't know about Avery. This was the part that took the longest to process. Daphne had been told that Cole was divorced, that his marriage had ended 2 years ago, amicably, no children, that he was a man who'd made a mistake in his 20s and was now, in his late 30s, finally ready for something real. Avery learned all of this in increments, over the course of 10 days, as the architecture of the lie became visible. She learned it the way you learn the extent of structural damage after a flood. First you see the watermark on the wall, and then you pull back the drywall, and then you find out it goes all the way to the foundation. She called Hazel from her sister's kitchen at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. The other woman didn't know, she said without preamble. He told her he was divorced. Hazel was quiet for a moment. That's not a man who made a mistake, she said. That's a man who built a whole system. Yes. Avery's voice was steady, in the way voices get when the crying is temporarily exhausted. 2 women. 2 sets of lies. A completely imaginary biography. Are you going to reach out to her? To Daphne? I don't know. A long pause. She's calling him constantly. He's not answering. She doesn't know what happened. She just knows he disappeared. Another pause. She must be sitting there thinking she did something wrong. Thinking she said the wrong thing, or pushed too hard, or she stopped. Avery, Hazel said. I know what it feels like, Avery said. To be in the dark and not understand why the ground shifted. It's the worst part. Not even the truth, just not knowing. So what do you want to do? The kitchen was quiet. Outside, a car passed and its headlights swept across the ceiling. I think I want to call her, Avery said. Not because I want to. Because I've been where she is and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. She found Daphne Okafor through Cole's phone. She still had his passcode, had had it for years. One of those small domestic facts that accumulates without drama. She found the call logs and she found the contact and she sat with the number for 48 hours before she called it. Daphne picked up on the first ring. She sounded the way Avery had sounded on the plane, that particular vocal quality of someone who has been waiting for something without knowing what they were waiting for. Hello? Hi, Avery said. My name is Avery. I think we need to talk. Daphne Okafor was 34 years old. She was a pediatric occupational therapist. She had a studio apartment in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, and a cat named Persimmon and a group of friends she had slowly been seeing less of because Cole had a way of making her want to be available, always in case he called. She met Avery at a coffee shop on Colfax Avenue on a Thursday morning. Avery had rehearsed what she was going to say. She'd written it out and practiced it in her sister's bathroom mirror. Calm, factual, kind. She was going to deliver information. That was all. She wasn't going to perform her grief in front of this woman. She wasn't going to need anything from her. She walked into the coffee shop and saw a woman at a corner table with her hands wrapped around a mug. And the expression on the woman's face was so familiar. The controlled composure over an ocean of something else, that Avery's throat closed for a second. She sat down across from her. They looked at each other. He told you he was divorced, Avery said. Not a question. Daphne's eyes filled. Yes, we've been married for 6 years. A long silence. The espresso machine behind the counter hissed and steamed. 2 college students argued cheerfully about something at the table near the window. I didn't know, Daphne said. Her voice was very small. I want you to know that. I don't do that. I wouldn't have. I believe you, Avery said. That's why I called you. Not to blame you. I called you because I thought you deserved to know the truth. She paused. And because I've been in the dark recently. And it's terrible. And you've been there longer than I have. Daphne pressed her hand to her mouth. She breathed carefully, the way people do when they're trying to hold themselves together in public. And Avery recognized that too. The airport, the plane, the plastic gate chairs, the practiced stillness of a woman in the middle of falling apart. I'm so sorry, Daphne said. I know that doesn't. You don't have to apologize to me, Avery said. You were lied to. So was I. She reached for her coffee. We were both managing a reality that someone else designed without telling us. Daphne stared at her. How are you this calm? I'm not, Avery said. I've been not calm for 2 weeks. Today I'm calm because I needed to be calm for this conversation. She paused. Tomorrow I'll probably cry in a parking lot again. Something shifted in Daphne's expression. The fragile, almost involuntary loosening of someone who has spent too long holding everything rigid. I cried in the pet food aisle of the grocery store yesterday, she said. Persimmon needed kibble and I just completely lost it between the fancy feast and the Friskies. Avery laughed. It came out before she could stop it, a real surprised sound. Daphne laughed too. It wasn't happiness. It was something older than happiness, the specific relief of being seen, of having your absurdity witnessed by someone who understands exactly where it's coming from. They stayed in that coffee shop for 2 hours. Cole Merritt vacated the apartment he and Avery shared in March. He took his clothes, his monitor, his record player, and a signed print he'd bought at an art fair that Avery had always found ugly and was relieved to see go. He called twice. She didn't answer. He texted a paragraph of explanation that she read once and deleted. Her lawyer said the proceedings would be straightforward. 6 years, no children, assets easily divided. Straightforward was a word that Avery was learning to hold carefully. It described the legal process, not the experience of it, and she was done letting one stand in for the other. She moved into a smaller apartment in the same neighborhood. She kept the furniture she'd chosen, and she bought new bedding. Something she'd been meaning to do for years. A set in a deep, saturated rust color that looked nothing like what they'd had before. She made the bed in her new apartment and stood back and looked at it and felt, for the first time in months, like a room was hers. She'd told Hazel about it on the phone. It's a strange thing, she said, how much of yourself you give to a shared space without noticing. And then suddenly you have a whole room that's just you, and you realize you hadn't had that in a long time. What color? Hazel asked. Rust. Like deep rust, almost terracotta. That's a good color, Hazel said. That's a color that knows what it is. Daphne texted her 3 weeks after the coffee shop meeting. I know this is maybe strange, but I've been thinking about you. I hope things are going okay. Also, Persimmon knocked over an entire glass of water on my laptop, and I had to tell someone. Avery stared at the message for a moment, and then she wrote back. Persimmon is clearly processing her own feelings about the situation. That's exactly what my therapist said, almost word for word. You have a very insightful therapist. She's wonderful. You should get one. I already have one, Avery wrote back. She says I'm catastrophizing with impressive academic rigor. That sounds exactly right, actually. They started texting regularly. It was not a thing Avery had planned. It was not a thing that followed any logic she could have predicted. That the woman her husband had deceived alongside her would become someone she wanted to check in with. Someone whose cat's bad behavior she wanted to hear about. Someone who understood the specific shape of this particular damage in a way that nobody else in her life could. They met for coffee again, and then for a walk along the trail at Washington Park. And then on a Saturday in late April that was warm enough to pretend summer was almost here, for brunch, at a place on Pearl Street with a patio and a Bloody Mary that Daphne said was life-altering. I want to ask you something, Daphne said, midway through the brunch, pulling apart a piece of sourdough toast. And you can tell me if it's too much. Go ahead. Do you think you'll trust someone again? Like another person, romantically? Avery considered the question seriously. It was the kind of question that deserved to be considered seriously. I don't know, she said. I think the trust question isn't really about another person, though. I think it's about trusting my own instincts. I overrode them for months because I didn't want to be the kind of person who suspects their spouse. She broke off a corner of her own toast. I knew something was wrong. I was just so committed to being wrong about being right. Daphne nodded slowly. I knew too, she said. He started canceling plans more. Little things. I kept thinking, he's busy, he's managing a lot, I shouldn't be needy. She shook her head. I used needing basic clarity as a character flaw. That's what he trained me to do. Trained, Avery said. That's the right word, isn't it? My therapist uses it. I'm going to steal it from your therapist. She'd be honored. The sun moved behind a cloud and then came back out, and the patio filled with that particular generous April light. Avery watched a pigeon investigate someone's abandoned croissant 2 tables over. I think I'll trust someone again, she said. Not soon, but eventually. And when I do, I'm not going to override myself. That's the thing I'm keeping. If I feel something, I'm going to say it out loud instead of explaining it away. She looked at Daphne. What about you? Daphne was quiet for a moment. I'm not thinking about that yet, she said. Right now, I'm just trying to get back to knowing what I want. Like, basic things. What I want for dinner. Where I want to spend my Saturday. What I want my apartment to look like. She smiled a little. Cole had opinions about everything, and I didn't realize how much space his opinions were taking up until he was gone, and there was all this room. And at first, the room felt like emptiness. But now it's starting to feel like space, and space is actually good. Space is where you put things you choose. Avery looked at her across the brunch table and thought, I did not expect this. She thought it the way you think about unexpected weather. Not with complaint, but with a kind of quiet astonishment at how the world arranges things. She had called Daphne to deliver information. She had not called her expecting to find a person she actually wanted to know. And yet here they were, on a patio in late April, with Bloody Marys and sourdough toast, talking about space and trust, and the strange discipline of learning to hear yourself again. Cole hired a lawyer and proposed a settlement division in May. Avery's lawyer said it was fair. Avery accepted it without counteroffer, not because she didn't have grounds, but because she had decided, somewhere in the middle of all of it, that she did not want to spend energy fighting for things. She wanted to spend energy going forward. She got to keep the car. He got to keep the record player. She hadn't liked his music anyway. Hazel flew through Denver twice more that spring. The second time, she had a 6-hour layover, and Avery drove to the airport, and they ate terrible sandwiches at a terminal restaurant and talked for 3 hours about things that had nothing to do with Cole Merritt or Douglas or marriages or betrayal. They talked about Hazel's childhood in Denver, the duplex on Claremont Street, the way the mountains looked from her childhood bedroom window. They talked about Avery's research, a paper she was writing about decision fatigue and moral licensing that she was actually excited about for the first time in months. They talked about Fig the rescue dog, who had developed an inexplicable hatred of the mailman. They talked about good books and bad turbulence, and the specific loneliness of hotel rooms, and why some cities feel like home the first time you visit them. At one point, Hazel said, "Can I say something that might sound strange?" At this point, in our friendship, Avery said, "I think about that flight sometimes. You holding up your phone. The way you said I need someone to look at this and tell me I'm not losing my mind." Hazel paused. "I've had a lot of layovers in a lot of airports, and I've talked to a lot of people, and I don't usually," she stopped. "I don't usually stay in touch. I don't usually think about them later." A pause. "I thought about you." "I thought about you too," Avery said. "You sat down in that jump seat when you didn't have to. I know. That's not a small thing." "No," Hazel said. "I guess it isn't." In June, Avery submitted her paper. Her department chair sent her a response that was effusive in the restrained, precise way of academic praise, and she took herself out to dinner at a restaurant she'd always wanted to try and sat alone at the bar and ordered the tasting menu and drank most of a very good bottle of wine and felt, for a sustained period of time, genuinely happy. She texted Daphne a photo of the dessert course, which was an elaborate chocolate thing with gold leaf on it. Daphne wrote back, "Is that gold? Are you eating gold? It appears so. You are living your best post-divorce life, and I'm eating cereal over the sink. Come next time," Avery wrote back. "I'll make a reservation. You do not have to ask me twice." Daphne got a promotion in July. Avery took her to that same restaurant to celebrate. They sat at a proper table this time, not the bar, and ordered cocktails with elaborate garnishes and talked for 4 hours without noticing the time passing. Daphne told her about one of her patients, a 7-year-old boy who'd been struggling with fine motor tasks and had that week, for the first time, successfully tied his own shoes. She described his expression, the shock of it, the joy, the way he'd immediately untied the lace and done it again, just to prove to himself it was real. "That's why I do it," Daphne said. 14 months of someone lying to me and making me feel like I was too much and not enough at the same time. And I go into work and a kid ties his shoes and I remember, oh, this is actually what matters. This is the thing. Avery looked at her across the table. She thought about something her therapist had said early on, in one of those first raw sessions, when everything was still very close to the surface. The question isn't what he took from you. The question is what you find out about yourself once you start building again. She was finding things out. She was finding out that she was braver than she'd thought, not in grand ways, but in small ones. The kind of brave it takes to call a stranger and say, "I think we need to talk." The kind of brave it takes to sit across from that stranger and not perform fine when you aren't fine. The kind of brave it takes to accept that connection can appear in airport terminals and coffee shops and on airplanes over the Rockies, and that the form it takes doesn't have to make sense for it to be real. She was finding out that she knew herself better than she'd been giving herself credit for. She'd known something was wrong. She'd known for months. And she'd been right, and she was done apologizing for being right. She was finding out, slowly and unevenly, and with many evenings of crying in parking lots and eating cereal over sinks, that a life could be rebuilt not by returning to what it was before, but by building something different. Something that actually fit the shape of who she was now. On a Tuesday in August, almost exactly a year after the flight from Phoenix, Hazel had a layover in Denver again. She texted Avery from the gate. "Terminal B, 3 hours, terrible food court coffee. Join me?" Avery was in the middle of editing a chapter. She saved her document, closed her laptop, and drove to the airport. They sat in the same general area of the terminal where they'd sat the first time. Same plastic chairs, same view of the tarmac, same gray skylight through the wide windows. But everything else was different. "Tell me something good," Hazel said, stirring her coffee. "Daphne got promoted," Avery said. "She got a lead position at a pediatric clinic." "That's great. Tell me something about you." Avery thought about it. "I'm going to a conference in Boston in September. First one I've been to in 2 years. I actually have things to say." She paused. "Also, I bought a plant, an actual living plant, and it's still alive. I've had it for 3 months." "What kind?" "A pothos. My therapist said to start with something that can survive neglect and work up from there." Hazel laughed. "Solid therapeutic advice. She's very practical." Ava wrapped her hands around her cup. "I had a moment last week," she said. "I was just sitting on my couch, reading. Fig was on my lap." She stopped. "Wait, no, Fig is your dog." "She is, yes. Persimmon was on my lap. Daphne was coming for dinner, and I was reading, and the light was coming in at a really specific angle, and I just thought, oh, this is a life. This is actually a good life." She was quiet for a moment. "It sounds small." "It doesn't sound small," Hazel said. "It's not what I thought my life was going to be." "No, but is it yours?" Avery considered the question. Outside, a plane pushed back from a gate and turned slowly on the tarmac, and the afternoon light caught the fuselage and made it briefly silver. "Yes," she said, "it's mine." Hazel raised her paper coffee cup. Avery raised hers. "To yours," Hazel said. "To yours," Avery said back. They sat there in the plastic chairs in Terminal B in the particular noise and stillness of an airport between departures, and neither of them needed to say anything else.